the end of the 19th century, the world appeared settled and controlled. Large sections of the global map were colored in one shade. That shade represented the British Empire. It was the largest empire humanity had ever known. Its territories stretched across oceans and continents, from Asia to Africa, from the Americas to the Pacific. Queen Victoria ruled over this vast domain. Her authority was symbolic, but her empire was real. British power flowed through trade routes, ports, and naval bases. The Royal Navy ruled the seas without challenge. London stood at the center of this system. It was more than a capital city. It was the financial engine of the world. Banks, insurance houses, and trading firms dictated global commerce. To the British elite, this dominance felt permanent. They believed order was natural. Hierarchy was justified. And British leadership was inevitable. The empire was managed by men who saw themselves as custodians of civilization. They sat in quiet rooms surrounded by leather books and polished wood. They believed history had chosen Britain to lead. But history rarely stands still. Across the Atlantic, another force was taking shape. The United States of America had spent most of the century focused inward. It expanded westward. It fought a brutal civil war. It conquered its continent. European powers viewed America with mixed feelings. Some saw it as crude. Others saw it as immature. Most saw it as temporary. But beneath the surface, something extraordinary was happening. American factories were multiplying. Steel production surged beyond British output. Railroads spread across the land, linking resources to cities. Immigration fueled population growth and labor power. By the 1890s, the United States had become an industrial giant. Yet it had no empire, no overseas outlets, no external mission. This imbalance created tension. Economic growth outpaced political ambition. Factories produced more than the domestic market could absorb. Booms were followed by devastating crashes. The Depression of 1893 shook the nation. Banks failed. Workers revolted. Confidence collapsed. The country was restless. A sense of destiny began to stir. A belief that America had earned a place among the great powers. That belief demanded expression. Meanwhile, Britain faced a different problem. Its empire was vast but strained. Defending distant territories consumed resources. Rivals were rising in Europe and Asia. Germany was building fleets. Russia expanded eastward. Japan modernized rapidly. Britain still appeared dominant. But beneath the surface, cracks were forming. These two trajectories were moving toward each other. One power at its zenith. The other at the beginning of its ascent. Their collision would not happen in Europe, nor in Asia, nor at a famous trade choke point. It would happen in a forgotten jungle. On the northern edge of South America lay a disputed territory, a region of dense forest, rivers, and swamps. Few Europeans could even find it on a map. This land sat between Venezuela and British Guiana. For decades, the border had been undefined. The land seemed worthless. No cities, no trade routes, no clear value. But empires despise uncertainty. Britain eventually drew a line that favored its own interests. Venezuela protested. Britain ignored them. For years the dispute remained dormant. Then gold was discovered. Suddenly the jungle mattered. Miners flooded in. Claims were staked, wealth flowed outward. Britain formalized its claim and expanded it. For Venezuela, this was a crisis. Control of the river system meant control of the economy. Loss meant dependency. Venezuela was weak, divided, unable to resist directly. So it turned north. To the United States, what followed would transform global power. Not through war, but through pressure, pride, and perception. This forgotten crisis would mark the moment when one empire realized the world had changed, and another realized it could command obedience. This was the moment the torch passed. For most of the 19th century, the jungle between Venezuela and British Guiana remained forgotten. It was a land of thick forests, slow rivers, and hidden dangers. Few outsiders cared where the border truly lay. But borders matter to empires. When Britain inherited Guiana from the Dutch, the western frontier was never clearly defined. The Dutch had not bothered. There was no incentive, no profit, no pressure. That changed when the British state decided clarity was necessary. In the early 1840s, London sent a surveyor. His name was Robert Schomburgk, a man trained in science mapping and imperial administration. Schomburgk travelled through the jungle. He charted rivers, hills, and paths. Then he drew a line. That line pushed British territory far westward. It claimed access to the mouth of the Orinoco River, the economic lifeline of Venezuela. To Britain, it was a technical adjustment. To Venezuela, it was theft. Caracas protested. Diplomats wrote letters. Maps were cited. History was debated. Britain refused to engage. At the time, Venezuela was politically unstable. Coups and revolutions followed one another. Britain saw no reason to negotiate with a fragile republic. The dispute lingered, decade after decade, unresolved, ignored, until gold was found. Prospectors discovered rich deposits along the rivers of the contested zone. News travelled quickly. Miners arrived in waves. British settlers poured into the territory. They built camps, roads, and supply routes. The land was no longer theoretical. The British government moved decisively. It endorsed the Schomburgk Line as official, then expanded the claim even further. The message was clear. The land was British. For Venezuela, this was intolerable. The loss threatened economic suffocation. Control of the Orinoco Delta meant control of trade, but Venezuela could not fight Britain. Not militarily. Not economically. Not diplomatically. Europe remained silent. No power wished to challenge London. So Venezuela turned to the one nation with both sympathy and ambition, the United States. At first, Washington was indifferent. Latin American border disputes were common. Few attracted attention. That changed when propaganda entered the picture. A former American diplomat named William Scruggs was hired by Venezuela. He understood the American political system. He understood newspapers. He understood emotion. Scruggs framed the dispute not as a local conflict, but as a challenge to American authority. He invoked a powerful idea, the Monroe Doctrine, declared in 1823. The doctrine warned European powers against interference in the Americas. For decades, it had been more principle than policy. America lacked the power to enforce it. But Scruggs argued that Britain was testing it, that the empire was expanding in the Western Hemisphere. That American credibility was on trial. His pamphlets flooded Washington. Lawmakers read them. Journalists repeated them. The message resonated. America in the 1890s was restless. The frontier was closed. The internal mission was complete. Now the nation looked outward. Economic depression had left the public angry. Politicians needed distraction. Newspapers needed drama. The British Empire became a convenient antagonist. President Grover Cleveland was not a warmonger, but he was under pressure. Strikes erupted. Unemployment rose. Confidence fell. Foreign resolve offered political salvation. His Secretary of State Richard Alney saw opportunity. Alney believed deeply in American exceptionalism. He viewed the Western Hemisphere as America's rightful domain. To him, the Venezuelan dispute was not about gold or jungle. It was about authority. If Britain could redraw borders at will, then the Monroe Doctrine was meaningless. In the summer of 1895, Alney drafted a message to London. It was unlike any diplomatic note before it. The tone was firm, confident, unapologetic. It declared that the United States was the dominant power in the Americas, that its judgment carried authority. that Britain must submit the dispute to arbitration. This was not a request. It was a declaration. When the message reached London, it was received with disbelief. British leaders considered the Monroe Doctrine irrelevant. It was not international law. It had never been recognised. Prime Minister Lord Salisbury dismissed the note. He believed the Americans were posturing. He delayed his response. Weeks passed, then months. In Washington, silence was interpreted as contempt. Cleveland and Olney concluded Britain was testing them. The delay hardened their resolve. By late 1895, the stage was set. Diplomacy had failed. Pride was at stake. The United States would now escalate. The next move would shock the world. December 1895. Washington was tense. President Grover Cleveland stood before Congress. What he delivered was not a speech. It was a warning. He announced that the United States would form its own commission. This commission would decide where the true border of Venezuela lay. And then he went further. He declared that once the American decision was made, the United States would resist any British attempt to govern territory that America judged Venezuelan. Resist by every means in its power. Those words echoed across the nation. In diplomatic language, they meant war. The message spread instantly. Newspapers printed it in bold type. Crowds gathered. Voices rose. America erupted. Republicans and Democrats united overnight. Political rivals embraced. The nation felt alive. For the first time since the Civil War, America had a common enemy: Britain. Militia units began drilling. Factories talked of armaments. Recruitment posters appeared. The American public believed the moment had come. The nation would finally prove itself. Across the Atlantic, the reaction was very different. In London, disbelief turned into alarm. Most Britons had barely heard of the Venezuelan border. Now they were told war was possible. The British press struggled to understand the fury. Why would America risk everything over jungle and gold? But diplomats knew the truth. This was not about land. This was about power. Lord Salisbury convened his cabinet. The discussion was grim. Britain still possessed the largest navy in the world, but it was scattered, protecting trade routes, guarding colonies, policing oceans. To fight America, the fleet would need to concentrate. That would expose the empire elsewhere. The threat from Germany was growing. Russia pressed in Asia. Africa simmered with unrest. A war with the United States would stretch Britain beyond its limits. Then came the harshest reality: Canada. The British Empire could not defend Canada. Its border with the United States was vast. Its population was small. Its defenses were thin. If war broke out, American troops could cross within weeks. Montreal and Toronto would fall. Britain had no means to stop it. There would be no glorious naval duel. No decisive victory. Only loss. Financial markets sensed danger before governments did. In New York, stocks collapsed. In London, panic followed. British investors held enormous American assets. Railways, factories, bonds. A war would destroy them. Bankers sent urgent messages to Downing Street. Do not do this. The British elite faced a terrifying choice: fight and risk imperial collapse, or retreat and accept humiliation. Public opinion demanded strength, but reality demanded restraint. As Christmas approached 1895, the world held its breath. Newspapers spoke of invasion routes, of iron ships, of national honor. Telegraph wires burned with messages. Then history intervened. From southern Africa came news of disaster. A British colonial raid had failed. Jameson and his men were captured. The mission was an embarrassment. But worse was yet to come. The German Kaiser sent a telegram, congratulating the Boers, mocking Britain. The message struck London like lightning. Germany was watching. Germany was challenging. Suddenly Venezuela seemed small. Britain could not face Germany and America at the same time. Strategic reality snapped into focus. Lord Salisbury understood. The empire must choose its enemy, and America could not be it. Behind closed doors the decision was made. Britain would retreat. Quietly. Carefully. Without admitting defeat. Diplomats signaled Washington. Britain was now open to arbitration. The tone softened. The arrogance vanished. In February 1896, Britain accepted the American proposal. The crisis was over. The world exhaled. No shots were fired. No ship sailed. Yet everything had changed. The decision to arbitrate was more than diplomacy. It was surrender without battle. Britain had spent months insisting it would never submit. Now it did. The arbitration tribunal met years later in Paris. Its members included judges from Britain and the United States. A neutral Russian diplomat presided. Venezuela was technically present, but its voice was faint. The ruling favored Britain. Most of the disputed land remained British. The gold stayed in Imperial hands. Yet the land was never the prize. Power was. The true victory belonged to the United States. Britain had accepted a new reality, that it could no longer act freely in the Western Hemisphere. The Monroe Doctrine had become enforceable law. From that moment forward, Britain altered its strategy. Historians would later call this shift the Great Rapprochement. It was not born of friendship. It was born of fear and calculation. Britain saw the future, and the future was American. The empire faced threats on every horizon. Germany was rising. Russia expanded eastward. Japan modernized rapidly. Britain could not fight them all. So it chose partnership. The first offering was control of the seas. Not globally, but locally. The Caribbean and Central America were quietly ceded. British influence faded. American influence expanded. Then came the Canal. 4 decades Britain and America shared rights over any Central American canal. The treaty ensured neither could dominate. In 1901, the United States demanded change. It wanted full control, exclusive rights, military fortification. Britain did not resist. The agreement was signed. Britain asked nothing in return. The Panama Canal became American. This was unthinkable a generation earlier. Next came the Navy. The Royal Navy withdrew from the Americas. Bases were reduced. Squadrons recalled. Canada was left undefended. Not by mistake, but by trust. Britain accepted that the United States would never invade. Because America was now the guardian. The power vacuum was immediate. In 1898, the United States went to war with Spain. Cuba fell. Puerto Rico followed. This was naked imperial expansion. Britain did not object. It supported the Americans. Diplomatically. Publicly. The old empire endorsed the new. The transformation was complete. The test came again in 1902. European powers blockaded Venezuela over unpaid debts. Germany was aggressive. Its ships menacing. President Theodore Roosevelt responded. He warned Europe to stay back. He declared the United States the policeman of the hemisphere. The British response was revealing. They withdrew without protest. Britain no longer challenged American authority in the Americas. The transfer of power was finished. This decision shaped the 20th century. When war came in 1914, Britain stood alone. Its empire strained. Its finances exhausted. It survived only through American industry and loans. Had Britain resisted in 1895, had war broken out, history would be unrecognizable. Instead, Britain chose survival over pride. The cost was dominance. The benefit was alliance. Venezuela gained protection, but lost autonomy. It exchanged British pressure for American influence. Oil would later replace gold. And the pattern would repeat. The border in the jungle still exists, an invisible scar through green wilderness. It marks the moment empires changed hands. The British lion stepped back. The American eagle stepped forward. The 19th century ended there, not with a war, but with a decision. Power passed silently, and the modern world began.